Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. Have some very special guests tonight, but want to let you know first that Ben Kinsley is joining us as co-host. Ben, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Nice to see you. Our guests this evening are Gary Frymire, who's the president of the USS Vermont Support Group and gift chair for the Vermont Commissioning Committee, and a special guest that I'm going to introduce in just a minute, but I would like to ask Gary to tell us a little bit more about his background.
Well, I was a retired IBM Global Project Executive. My son works for Knowles Atomic Power Labs, which makes the nuclear propulsion for these submarines. And he invited me to a christening and ended up not getting tickets. So I reached out to the governor's office. He introduced me to Deborah. And the next thing you know, Deborah's asking me questions about my IBM background. Do you know how to build a website? And from there, I helped them with that, and then became a gift chair, and it just got deeper and deeper involved. And as you see, it's going to be a multi-year project going forward.
That's great. We're really looking forward to talking about this because Gary's got some exciting news for us. And my very special guest star, our guest star is Al Perry, and I will read you a little bit of Al's bio, and you will be as impressed as I am. And it's so good to see a dear friend after quite too long a time, Al.
Nice to see you.
Yes, thank you. Al is a VCC and VSG member. He's a retired USN submarine captain who commanded the U.S. Spade ship and the Vermont legislature. And the Perry family has over, ready for this, 150 years of naval service. Al alone has 30. Between them, it includes service on 17 submarines, 4 aircrafts, a cruiser, and a destroyer. And he's a dear friend from the legislature. I can't tell you how excited I am to see you, Al, seriously. I was thinking about you today. I was testifying for a campaign for Vermont, and I was just wishing I could. And I'm going to talk to Al Perry tonight, so we're here.
Pat gets starstruck a little bit.
I do like it's like, oh, it's Al Perry. Anyway, would you like to add anything to that? 150 years is hard to top.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say again, it's good to see you again, and enjoyed working with you in the legislature. It wasn't that long ago, but it's a different time, and that was a good experience. I'm sure you felt the same way.
Oh, I miss it.
I'm a native Vermonter, born and raised in Richford, and served in the Navy for 30 years. The name of the submarine I commanded is the Spade Fish, F-I-S-H, SSN 668. And I was on that submarine, commanded that submarine in the early 70s, 1971 to 75. And I really enjoyed my time in the Navy, and or at least found it very satisfying, and proud to be a Navy veteran and a Vermonter.
Pat, you're on mute there, but that is really, we hear about naval service all the time and how important it is to our country. But it's also cool when you have someone that's, from our backyard here in Vermont that, is out commanding submarines, and that's kind of a big deal. So that's very cool. Thank you for doing that. And representing our country and our state. So we really appreciate you doing that.
Yes. We do. Thank you. So I just wanted to give you a little background. On March 5th, Gary and retired Chief Warrant Officer Bill Mattoon and Susan Martin, who works for the state actually, were on the show on March 5th to talk about the commissioning of the USS Vermont, which was scheduled for April 18th of 2020 in Groton, Connecticut. And it was an amazing show, and I would really encourage you to check it out on YouTube. But Gary, suddenly this little thing called COVID happened, and about the same time, and a lot of changes happened to the commissioning. Could you just tell us what happened and what all the changes were made?
Well, as you said, it was a tremendous disappointment. A lot of work had gone into preparing for the April 18th event. And what eventually occurred, because the boat was ready to join the fleet, was the boat was administratively commissioned, and it was commissioned on schedule on April 18th with only a partial crew on board. And Commander Phillips conducted the ceremony for the commissioning over the sub's PA system. And it included a prayer, kind of a history of the prior USS Vermonts. And he then went to the top of the boat and raised the commissioning pennant. And we had, he held a moment of silence for Bernie Juskowitz, a commissioning committee member in the past.
Thank you.
And thanks sponsored Gloria Valdez and the Vermont Commissioning Committee. Then they played Anchors Away, which is obviously a great tradition. And because of the USS Vermont, Moonlight in Vermont from Sinatra.
Oh, how lovely. Oh my God, my mother would be in tears if she were there.
And as the 19th Virginia class boat, they then rang the ship's whistle 19 times. And if you're not sure what that sounds like, out on the website, ussvermont.org, we have a little capture of it so you can see what they heard 19 times. Then after that, there was a special meal done and a cape cutting. And it wasn't the 2,500 people on a pier that we had planned for and anticipated, but it was unfortunately a COVID victim, and at least we will hear a little bit more about it as we go forward and how the VCC members celebrated it.
That's great, thank you. Oh, because we were thinking about kind of showing up, but there were thousands of people that descend on Groton, didn't they? Well, usually. So it's a shame. I just wanted to ask, one thing I found fascinating was how, and maybe Al can talk about this, was how a new crew became a plank owner. And I just found that fascinating when we talked about it, and I thought it was worth repeating for people who may not have seen the first show. And how did they handle?
Plank owner is a Navy term for the any member of a crew at the time that the ship was commissioned. And it could be a minesweeper, it could be an aircraft carrier, it could be a submarine, but anyone who's on the crew at the time of commissioning is a plank owner and receives some sort of recognition and certificate of that status. I'd like to give just a quick background on the plank owners of the USS Vermont. It was a crew of about 140 officers, chief petty officers, and enlisted total. And two of those enlisted men are Vermont natives. One is a petty officer from Danville, Vermont, and the other is a petty officer, Johnson, from Rutland, I believe. We were very proud and pleased to know that they were on board, and we contacted their families, and we hope that their families are following their progress as keenly as we are. Back to the plank owner business. In the case of our submarine, some of those plank owners arrived at the shipbuilding company, Electric Boat, 2 or 3 years ago, and were on in that crew. It's called a pre-commissioning unit for a couple of years before the ship was commissioned. Some of the original arrivals were already qualified in submarines, and that would be the core group, officers, chief petty officers, and senior enlisted. But as the ship was being built, more and more crew would report, and many of those new arrivals were not already qualified in submarines. So they got farmed out to operate submarines in the Pacific and the Atlantic, and spent their months on board qualifying on other submarines, so that when the ship was commissioned, a large majority of the crew was already qualified. So we have well-qualified of plank owners start out on April 18th of last year.
That's great. Al, could you mention the petty officer from Danville, who some of his relatives were, their names? You told me before, so Ben would like to know this.
I've got to look at my notes.
Yeah, Pat, it was Ian Blackmore from Danville.
Ian Blackburn.
Oh, yeah. And his relatives were?
He is from Danville, Vermont. And when the ship was commissioned, two of his family were in the state legislature. Representative Kitty Toll, TOL, was chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, and Senator Jane Kitchell was her counterpart, chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. So I'm sure they're very proud, and we're just delighted to have that connection.
Well, we're going to send this video to them and thank them very much for his service. Anyway, Gary, how did did all of the servicemen get their certificate? How did they handle it in the COVID?
Well, we would normally have presented the plaques at an event just before the commissioning ceremony itself, but obviously with COVID, that opportunity was lost. So it wasn't until July 8th that we took the boxes of plaques and several other gifts down and gave them to the chief of the boat. And Deborah Martin, the chair of the commissioning committee, and her husband Steve were the ones that delivered them. And they were able to hand probably about 12 to 15 members their plaques directly. And the rest of them were distributed when the folks came back to the boat. That's great. That's nice. Ben, you good to go?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating process to me, the commissioning of a new boat. And there's a lot of tradition wrapped around it. There's a lot of there's a lot of ceremony and pomp and circumstance wrapped around it. Like, do you feel? I mean, there's a lot of casualties that we can complain about with COVID, but do you feel like the commissioning of the boat, even though it didn't go the way that any of us would have hoped, was still meaningful and a special event?
It will be. The Secretary of the Navy had sent a letter to Deborah Martin saying that we would hold this because we would not rob the sailors of this opportunity. So we are currently working. Deborah, the sponsor, Gloria Valdez, the command of the boat, the base, and the Navy are working together to determine the best possible date for it. And we're working towards the target of summer this year.
Oh, that's wonderful news. That's excellent.
I might like to interject this from an old veteran's point of view. When we were in a shooting war, World War II, there wasn't a lot of ceremony when submarines or other warships got commissioned. They just put them in the water and sent them to sea.
Right. Yeah, well, I'm very glad that they're going to take the time to thank these and recognize the USS Vermont and its crew. Gary, can you tell us about where the boat's been, since then, and where is she now?
Well, by design, Pat, we don't really know where she is at any given time. But usually when she comes back, when our sub moves, we learn a little bit more about what's happening. And she's been doing a lot of testing and training and certification operations in the Atlantic. And we know that she's made port calls at Port Canaveral and Kings Bay, and most recently at the Brazilian naval base just outside of Rio de Janeiro. And that was in mid-September. But somehow rather
I'm sorry, is that the story about the maple syrup? Maybe you could expand on their trip to Brazil.
I'll tell you about that in a few minutes, but I just want to tell you one of the magical things is that even though mid-December they were 5,000 miles away in Brazil, the CO was able to get the boat home on Christmas Eve morning to the surprise and delight of the families.
Oh, how wonderful.
And we just learned that the USS Vermont will continue. Right now, they're in and out. They're in and out quite a bit, and that's because she's been helping other submarines get certified. So that's going to continue up until the point that the boat comes back and enters what's known as PSA. And I think Al's a little bit more qualified to tell you what that is than I am.
You want to talk about that now?
Right ahead, Al. Okay.
Yeah.
maple syrup in a minute.
Okay, PSA, the Navy and the military are full of acronyms. PSA is post shakedown availability. And the key word probably is shakedown. Shakedown is what they're doing now. It's the period from commissioning where they do a lot of training, a lot of different trials to check out all the different systems, weapon systems, sensors, all the operational capability of the ship, including deep dives, maneuvers, etc. So that's the shakedown part. And they do sound trials to see how quiet they are, make sure they're as quiet as they're supposed to be, etc. So they're in a shakedown period conducting trials and training. And when there's a shipyard available to them, they will come in and do the post-shakedown availability. And the availability is a euphemism for a period of time where there's crew is in port at a maintenance facility where they can get the required periodic maintenance and shore support, where the crew, portions of the crew can be rotated, as some of these sailors have been on board for 2, 3, 4 years, and they're due to go somewhere else. And crew rotation, leave, which is the sailor's term for vacation. You go on leave, you leave the ship. And most everybody who's not rotating will have an opportunity to take some leave, 1 or 2 weeks at a time, to be with their families and sweethearts and so forth. And in addition to the maintenance and the training, in-port training, and personal leave, and there will be probably some fitting of new equipment that wasn't available during the construction period. This is giving you a general description. In the Vermont case, I don't know if they're getting any new equipment or what they're getting, but that's a possibility. I've been through 2 post-shakedown availability periods, one on the Sam Houston SSBN back in '62, and one on the Haddock SSN in '68. Both were quite different, and probably in the case of Sam Houston, quite compressed. As at the time in '62, the United States was anxious to get as many of those SSBNs out to sea as soon as they could. Anyway, that's the post-shakedown availability. We don't know when it'll start. We think it will be at Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut, where they were built. We don't know how long it will be, but we're expecting that we'll have a chance to see them, COVID permitting.
Great.
They might have a chance to see us, but more importantly to them, they'll have a chance to see their families.
Exactly.
And get some shore leave.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Al. That's great. All right, back to the maple syrup.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've got to hear
very
about
interesting
this.
story. I got a phone call from Commander Phillips, and he said that he was going to be going to a foreign country and making a presentation of gifts to a foreign head of state. And he was asking for some suggestions on what might best represent Vermont. Of course, that answer is maple syrup.
Well, syrup.
So we reached out to Burr Morse at Morse Farm because in 2019, the sailors went to Morse Farm to learn all about sugaring. So there's a little history there.
Oh, great.
And we picked up 8 bottles, 8 maple leaf glass bottles, of maple syrup and sent them down. They had both the Morse Farm and the Vermont Commissioning Committee logo on them. We delivered them to the chief of the boat. Those bottles traveled over 5,000 miles before being presented to the President Bolsonaro of Brazil, the Admiral of the Brazilian Navy, and other dignitaries, along with other gifts to our allies. But it was a proud moment for all Vermonters.
Oh, that's great. I bet Burr must have been thrilled to know that's where his maple syrup was going.
I'm sure he'll have it on advertising at some point.
Yes, that's great.
I'd be waving that banner.
Yeah. So I just wanted to, I'm sorry, Ben.
No,
go ahead. You go.
So there's a couple things that there's a USS Vermont support group, which is called the VSG, I believe, right? Is that the acronym for it? Can you tell us a little bit about what that group is, what it does, and what you guys are up to?
Well, I'll give you a little bit about the mission statement. It's basically an organization. It's you can think of it as the portion of the commissioning committee that still exists after the ceremonies are completed. Our mission is we're an organization of individuals and businesses that are dedicated to providing support for the USS Vermont, her officers, crew, and families for the life of the boat. In order to accomplish that mission, we have a number of objectives we've identified, including supporting morale and well-being of the crew and their families, encouraging, advocating, and generating a community of support for the crew of the USS Vermont, including educating the citizens of Vermont about their boat, and promote lasting relationships between the state and the crew of the USS Vermont, and raising funds and financing appropriate events and activities that are associated with these objectives. That's pretty much the storyline, and we're about 15 members large right now, and we'll have more come over from the commissioning committee when their events wind down. But we're also looking to grow our membership with companies, partners, additional folks in Vermont that are interested in the boat, and we have a variety of plans in place to do just that.
Al, you're part of this group, are you not?
I am.
Yeah. And I think businesses, you should reach out to the legislature. They would love to hear from you. Of course, there's so many new ones these days. You and I don't even know half of them, but the ones that are there would know us.
Well, we're planning to send we're going to send a new letter to everybody in the General Assembly next month.
Great.
We did that 2 years ago when the last General Assembly was seated, and we'll do it again. I guess there's 20 or 30 new members this year.
Yeah, there are. It's a big turnover. And we don't have all the leadership is gone as well. There's brand new leadership. So I'm sure they'll love to see you get that letter. Back to the maple syrup, Gary, you had some great news from our executive director of the Vermont Maple Syrup Sugar Association, did you not?
The boat and the and maple syrup has been a pretty tight relationship from the start. There was actually little pints of maple syrup handed out at the christening back in 2018, and there's just been an awful lot of affinity between the two, and it's appropriate for Vermont. But with maple syrup, we particularly after presenting syrup for the Brazil's president, the crew, as Al mentioned, the crew rotates in and out from time to time. And one of the things working with a group of the crew wives, they're called the Family Readiness Group, the FRG, we're working to support them as well. But when new sailors come in, one of the things we do is we want to make sure that they're welcomed into the Vermont family. And one of the ways we're going to do that is to be able to give each one a pint of maple syrup. So we reached out initially to the Orange County group, which is Bill Mattoon's brother Hale and Roger Palmer, and told them the story of what we're proposing to do. And they said, we'll present that to Allison Hope, who's the executive director of the VMSMA. So we did that and spent a little time with her in advance and found out there's 12 counties involved with maple syrup production. So they took the proposal to the board, and in true Vermont fashion, the board agreed that that was a great idea to support the boat and the crew, and agreed to the first 50 pints will come from Orange County. And during the meeting in A gentleman by the name of Arnie Piper from Lamoille County wants to be the 2022 provider of SERP. So the beautiful thing here is we've kind of established a long-term relationship, because obviously this boat's going to go for 30 plus years. So they'll keep rotating county by county as the years progress, so that everybody has an opportunity to step up and support the USS Vermont sailors.
That is so great. That's really amazing. Thank you all.
That's a real Vermont story there.
That makes you proud of the Vermont.
Yeah,
I hope
exactly.
that gets into the press, because that's a great story, and it's great for our maple syrup producers as well. So thank them. That's
Well,
great.
if I may put a postscript on that, we have probably 500 or 600 or 700 nice Vermont stories just like that over the last 2 years. So many Vermonters, individuals, companies, corporations, etc., have helped us both with funding and in-kind donations and so forth. It's a wonderful feeling to be able to put Vermont and Vermont together.
Well, there's something very unique about Vermont, as much as some of us complain, which I'm, about taxes and stuff, but when the chips are down or when there's a need, we step forward. And as we could say, Vermont strong, huh? Which could lead us into our next conversation. I wanted to talk a little bit, Representative Bernie Juskowitz, who you reached out to and who's helped on a project we're going to talk about. He passed away from COVID, and I just wanted to take a few moments to recognize his passing and his service, not only to the Vermont legislature, but also to the USS Vermonter. And maybe we could talk about Vermont Strong and why we're mentioning Vermont Strong license dates.
Well, I'm honored to talk about Bernie Juskowitz. I'm honored to talk about Bernie Sanders also, but I'm honored to talk about the late Bernie Juskowitz, who I didn't know before the fall of 2018, but a year later, I felt like we were brothers. We worked together on the Vermont Commissioning Committee from the time he joined late 2018 until his death last April. Just a wonderful man. I think he was born and raised in Massachusetts, and as an adult, he worked for IBM several years, probably 2 decades or more. And then I believe he worked for the state of Vermont and the Department of Labor with a number of notables, including someone named Pat McDonald.
Exactly, Commissioner.
And after that service in the state of Vermont as a public servant, he ran for office. He was living in Cambridge at the time, and he represented that district, I believe, from January 2013 until either 2017 or 2019. I'm not sure about that. Bernie was the kind of guy that I think most men would like to be. He was tall, he was fit, he always had a smile, but he was dedicated about whatever he was doing, whether it was his job or his volunteer work. He had a great, he had a keen support for people who were helping others, including a group in Johnson, Vermont, that are helping with drug addiction problem. And but like I say, we came together in the Vermont Commission Committee. I think because Deborah Martin, our chair, who had worked at the Department of Labor, knew Bernie and knew what kind of a great asset he would be, and invited him. And of course, he couldn't say no. As it happens, he and I had one thing in common, and that is we each served in the legislature. So we formed a two-person team, and we were the folks who went to the State House to make our pitch for state support, which turned out to be successful. And thanks to Bernie, and thanks also to the appropriations committees. He had served, I think, for either 2 or 4 years on the House Appropriations Committee. So I had also, but quite a few years before that. So I think we were a good team. He certainly did more than his share. And early in the Vermont Committee, we were kind of scrambling to define ourselves, get ourselves organized, and also prepare material to show to the boat, the USS PCU Vermont crew, about Vermont. And one of the ideas was the term Vermont Strong. And later on, Bernie had the idea we should give everybody in the crew a Vermont Strong license plate. And I think, but he engineered all that and made the necessary contacts and picked up the license plates and delivered them to our committee.
Great.
That was his last public act. And God bless Bernie. We're grateful for his contribution. We're grateful for his family, and we wish them well.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Al. That was great. When I walked into the legislature and saw Bernie, I went, oh, a friend, because it's always good to know a legislator on a committee. I didn't know he had run, but I was so thrilled to see him up there. And may I say, he became a great legislator. He was excellent, very responsive to the people. So Gary, we should talk a little bit about your being gift chair, which I don't know, does this fall under the commissioning or?
Well, that's the Vermont Commissioning Committee. Yes, I was a gift chair there. I'll just tell you a little bit about it because, again, it's great stories of Vermonters stepping up. And just to set the tone, in gifts to the boat and crew alone, over $20,000 of donations in kind by Vermont individual artists and businesses helped make the gifts that we provided to the boat that much more special. So there's a few that are worth mentioning. I think the first one you're probably well aware of was Chris Miller from Calais, who carved a replica of the USS Vermont. And what made it particularly special is he used a remnant from the series carving on top of the State House to make the model from. So that's a tremendous tie between the state and the boat there. And
that's pretty cool.
It is.
How did he get a hold of that?
Well, Chris is the one that did the carving of the series model on top of the State House. And he had a couple pieces left, and he thought that would make it even more special, and indeed it did.
Great.
There was
awesome.
another gentleman from Woodstock, gentleman by the name of Neil Drevitson, was the one who created the ship's portrait for us. And interesting story there. I didn't have a lot of experience with artists, but when Bob Burke, who was on the committee for gifts as well, we went down to meet with Neil. And we told him we had signed him up to work with us, and we told him some of the design elements we were thinking about. He told us that the portrait was 95% done. He said that the concept of the boat in the submarine, and it haunted him. So he started working right away, and he couldn't stop. So it turned out to be a very beautiful picture, and it's actually on the wardroom right now in the boat, where it's permanent location for as long as the boat's active.
Nice.
And I'll just two more. One is the unique gift. Most of these gifts have been done over the years in multiple Virginia class boats, but we had our Cobb told us, he had an idea. Instead of a ship in a bottle, how about a sub in a maple syrup jug? Well, and so I think a pretty clever idea. So I took a design and met with Glenn Zemke out in Stowe and kind of reached out to to Simon Pierce down in Woodstock. These are known glass blowers, but
Sure.
neither one of them had the capability of doing it. So interestingly, we were referred to a gentleman by the name of Jeff White at the Byrne Gallery in downtown Burlington, Vermont.
Right.
So between Jeff and when he first saw the idea and he saw the design, he was, I think he was captivated by it. He thought that this would be really cool. So it ended up with him working with fellow artists Aaron Zeal and Tyler Schnabel, and they brought the Sub in a Jug to life. It has not yet been seen in public. I shared a picture with Pat of it in the process of being made, but that is one gift that won't be presented until we're actually together with the boat for the commissioning ceremony this summer.
Well, I can't wait to see that. That will be exciting.
We're gonna go, Ben. We gotta go. We'll take videos of this. We'll bring our
I'll be there. I'll be the first in line.
It is quite amazing. The only other one that's exciting to mention was we had to get a piece of the BB-20 silver service. That was the second USS Vermont. So we wanted to get a piece of that silver service from the State House onto the boat. And of course, it's a maple syrup jug, gold lined. And we ended up having to work with Senator Leahy's staff because the Navy doesn't break up a silver service. But somehow or other, with Senator Leahy's support and David Sheets and State House, we ended up successful and presented that to the boat as well. So that now resides in a display case on the boat for the life of the boat.
Could I ask you just one more story about the logo? Because just so folks know, we have a lot of pictures that you've provided that we're going to show at the end of the video. But could you talk about the logo?
Sure. It's well, we put together the logo for the VCC way back in the beginning, and it was, something simple. We just had to modify the ship's crest to a point that the Navy was okay with it being changed. For the VCC, it's kind of more of a wide open field, and what we ended up doing was taking a background of probably the most notable mountain in Vermont. It's not Mount Mansfield, but Camel's Hump. It kind of jumps out at you whenever you see it. You know exactly what you're looking at.
Right.
We took Camel's Hump, we put a little whimsical body of water in front of it that doesn't exist, so we could put a sub in it. And then on either side of Camel's Hump, you'll see the Vermont State Seal, and you'll see the ship's crest. And that kind of talks about our role in bridging the USS Vermont with the state of Vermont. And down at the bottom of the logo is actually what they call the brow sign, the ramp that sits between the pier and the boat. That sign hangs on it, and that's an exact replica of what's on the boat. So that came together to become our logo. It's kind of big and square and a little bit unwieldy, but we're happy to have it.
It's great, and the colors and everything. What did you say about the brow sign? What was that? What was that?
What you see at the bottom of the logo is actually a large vinyl sign that hangs on the ramp between the pier and the boat, so people know when they go by, this is the USS Vermont.
I see. Okay, cool. Now, were you involved in all of this as well?
Well, I was on the committee, but I didn't do all the work. We have a great committee, and I'd like to say just a couple things about our committee, and then before we finish, I'd like to say a few things about the officers and the crew. Our committee is about 25, 26, 27, all volunteers. We've never had anybody but volunteers, no paid staff, and one of the many contributions made by that committee is the thousands of hours and probably thousands of miles driven around the state and to and from Groton, Vermont. It's been, I would say, a rewarding experience to work with a group of Vermonters. Most of us didn't know each other before we got together, but it was a good team, and we certainly had a great chair and vice chair. Deborah Martin was our chair, one of the most considerate and forgiving chairpersons that I've ever worked for, and her husband Steve I don't think she, even if they weren't married, she couldn't have found a better teammate, in my opinion. So we still do have a great team.
Good.
When there's a minute, I'd like to talk about the crew.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, go right ahead.
I'm not, as a Vermonter, I'm aware of the fact that submarines don't come to Vermont, and Vermonters don't go to submarine ports very often, so they don't get an opportunity. Vermonters don't get an opportunity to see submarines or even associate with submarine sailors very much. But I'd like to talk to you about these sailors. We think they're the cream of the crop in the Navy. Out of 140 officers and crew on board, I suppose 10 or 20 will be in their mid to late 30s at the max. 100 will be in their early 20s or late teens. And of course, it varies from submarine to submarine, but every one of those sailors has volunteered for submarine service and has gone through rigorous school shore training and screening to make sure they're psychologically adaptive to life on a 400-foot vessel for being submerged for 60, 70, 80 days at a time. And thorough training on board. Every Vermont sailor and every other submariner has to qualify in submarines and has to qualify on that submarine, even though they're already qualified on the submarine. And that's for safety and confidence and teamwork. They're all bright, and I'm going to show a magazine cover. I just got this. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. That is a cover of the American Submariner, a magazine that I received today. The American Submariner is the magazine for submarine veterans. But I'm showing you this so you can see what the training of these young sailors involves. Look at that array of controls, and that sailor is probably 19, 20, or 21 years old, and he's being trained to control the boat when it's submerged, working for the diving officer to keep.
Al, can you lift that up a little bit? Al, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just lift up the picture a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
The picture is just to illustrate the complexity.
Right.
And so we're very proud of our sailors, or especially we on the Vermont Commission Committee, especially proud of our captain, the chief of the boat, the executive officer, the rest of the crew. And we hope that every Vermonter will be both proud and have a chance to see the boat or see a sailor here in Vermont sometime soon.
On the first show, when Gary was with us and Bill and WCAX had just done a story about the USS Vermont, and they allowed us, Darren Perrin allowed us to attach the clip to the video, and it showed, Gary, you probably should give me the right words. It showed where the boat is. You better tell it because I'm going to mess up the words. When they showed it, it was all covered up because it was all confidential.
Oh, it was in the building where the ship was put together.
You know,
Yeah,
I-
they showed where the officers ran the boat. Is that the right word? Who knows?
Yeah,
And
Pat's
the-
talking about the WCAX piece where Darren
Yeah.
Perrin was actually on board, and he went into the command center.
Command
And
center.
all of the equipment was covered with
Yeah.
shields and
Yeah.
that was amazing. It was kind of like, and we could have to kill you if we showed you. So we were glad they covered it up. You said, Al, that they get trained on submarines, but then they get trained on the specific boat that they're assigned to or that they volunteer for. Is that because the boats are different, or you're looking at how they work as a team together? Why do they have to be qualified on both submarines and the submarine they're assigned to?
Well, the bottom line is, in order to stay in submarines, whether officer or enlisted, serve in submarines and stay in submarine service, you have to qualify. And when you qualify, you get this insignia. It's called a set of dolphins. And every qualified submariner will wear that insignia with pride. It takes over 6 months on some submarine that's operating for the enlisted to qualify, and it could take up to a year for an officer. And the qualification involves learning all about the submarine, every part of that submarine. So in an emergency, no matter what compartment you're in, you can contribute to the action
Right.
in that compartment. And also, when the submarine goes to sea, before submerging, the submarine rigs for dive. Rig for dive is the order, and then it's an all hands effort, and the whole crew has an assignment to check different valves, different controls, different equipment throughout the boat, and then report that that space is rigged for dive, and that is done by 2 different people separately, so that we have a assurance that it is rigged for dive. That happens before any submarine dives. That's standard practice. And
Right.
so you have to learn all about the submarine so you can do that quickly and
Yeah.
correctly.
No leaking in the submarine, huh? No.
Yeah, that's bad. Don't do
Yeah,
that.
that's bad. That's bad. And by the show, Gary, didn't they say there's no more periscope? There's no periscopes anymore.
You're talking to
the-
Gary?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gary.
yeah. I think it was interesting if you saw some pictures of the Brazil trip. The president of Brazil was holding an Xbox controller, and I can only guess what he was doing was articulating the photonic mast and looking around at the base. But yeah, the ship, the new USS Vermont and other Virginia class boats have a fly-by-wire system, so it's controlled more by fiber optic cables and controllers than the older boats in Al's day, which had something that looked like an aircraft cockpit that had a yoke that went up and down. So a lot's changed, and actually that is attractive for young 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that really are good with those Xbox controllers.
That's cool. I think obviously lots changed with submarines, but the technology's gotten so much better. Even if the methods are still somewhat similar, you're still kind of doing similar operations and stuff. One of the things I think is interesting. So the USS Vermont is a fast attack submarine, right? It's not a one of the larger ICBM submarines.
Correct.
It's pretty large, though.
It's still pretty large.
7,000 tons.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Still a big boat.
7,000 tons. My submarine was about 3,000 tons.
So this is
Wow.
more than twice the size. This new one. Is it the largest fast attack sub that the U.S. has, or is it are there other ones that are the same size or bigger?
Oh, that's a good question, and I'm sorry I can't confirm, but I think it is the largest.
Yeah,
Tonnage
we're
wise.
377 feet long, 34 feet across, displaced 7,835 tons of water. And I'm pretty sure that we're a little bit longer than the Los Angeles class, which is the other active fast attack subs today.
Yeah. Most people, and this is not a criticism, most people just don't know, and so they can't appreciate the capability of these ships. This ship, the Vermont, and her sister ships are built to operate without refueling for 30 years. 30 years. And they can stay submerged for 60, 70, 80, 90 days. The only limitation on that is food.
Food, yep.
How much food can you carry? And of course, the tolerance of staying submerged with 120 other folks for that long. But they create their own breathable air. They manufacture oxygen, and they remove CO2. It's a wonderful, wonderful weapon.
That's very cool.
I can't stand being quarantined in my own home for all these months. I cannot imagine the strength and the capability of those men to be able to withstand that. That is amazing.
Yeah, we're all getting a taste of that, huh?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, you gotta see it to believe it, and I hope you and lots of other Vermonters will come to Groton when we do.
We'd love it.
The commission.
You let us know, we'll be there, right, Ben?
Of course.
I say so. Yeah.
We'll be first in line.
How long? How much time do we have left, Ben?
We've got about 3 minutes. I think we should probably talk about the commissioning committee and what's happening with that now that the boat is technically commissioned, although there's still a ceremony this summer, hopefully, right?
Yeah, so yeah, it was supposed to go late this summer, but I bet it's been extended, correct?
We will have events this summer. We probably had about 5 scheduled before. It might be down to 2 or 3. They will be decidedly smaller, and fewer people will be able to attend. But it will still be held, and we will still make the very most of it.
That's great.
Wonderful.
When we had to regroup, obviously, but a month or two ago, our chairman, Deborah, put out a message and said to our committee and said, "Let me know what your wish list is for." When we get the opportunity to commemorate the commissioning. So one of my wishes is that we'll get as many Vermont residents down there in person, either on the day or day before or the day after, and that they get a chance to visit a submarine, learn about what submariners go through for their training, go to the museum and the USS Nautilus, and just learn as much as they can, and not just go to a ceremony. And that's my wish.
Great. Well, we thank you both. Any final words, Gary? Or
yeah, I think one of the things I want to make sure that we leave you with is the answer to the question: how do most Vermonters get involved if they want to support the USS Vermont support group?
Right.
And frankly, our contact information is on the ussvermont.org website under the USS Vermont support group page. And we're on Facebook at USS Vermont support group. So we welcome all Vermonters and hope to have as many members as we have residents in the state at some point. But
yes.
we're turning nobody away.
That's great. Thank you both for being on, Al. Again, it was a delight to see you.
You haven't changed a bit.
What? I haven't? Did you hear that, Ben?
I heard that.
Yeah, right.
I'm not sure if I believe him.
He's being very gracious. Anyway, we'll see you in Groton, and thank you both for being on. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.